Hey everybody, welcome to the Uncommon Chiropractic YouTube channel. Thank you for joining me. And today we are going to be learning about and going through the workshop on ADHD, anxiety, sensory processing disorder, autism, all things neurology based here. And we're going to be digging into the cause of those neurodevelopmental, neurological disorders. And we're going to be giving you lots of good information tonight. But before we start, I'd like to just ask, number one, that you subscribe to my channel, and number two, that you share this video with somebody that you know that's struggling with one of those challenges that we talked about. I've been doing this workshop for about 10 years now, and I just know the impact that this information has to those that watch it, and the ability that this information has to be life-changing to those that take action from the information that we're going to talk about. And I'm going to be sharing my screen here, and I want to just give you a little preview of the information today. And number one, the information that I'm going to share tonight, I hope is going to give you some answers. And I know that if you're a parent or you're a person that's struggling, or you know somebody that's struggling with these certain challenges, that you're constantly looking for reasons why you or your child are struggling. You're looking for answers. Anything you can do to help find out a solution to make the problem get better, to live a better quality of life. And the first thing that I want to give with this information is answers to some of those questions that you've likely been having for a long time. And in my experience, this information is unique. This is information that, as well educated as most people who are searching for answers and doing Google searches and part of, Facebook support groups and constantly searching for answers, this information is unique. And I am told after about every presentation that this is information that you likely haven't heard before, which is really cool because you're going to get some answers to some of those questions you've been having. And once you know the answer to a problem in life, regardless of what that aspect of life we're referring to, whether it's a school problem or a learning a new sport, or you're just stuck and you learn and you find out some answers and you get some answers to some of the questions that you have as to why you're having those challenges, it gives you hope. And most importantly, I pray that this information gives you guys some hope to see a light at the end of the tunnel, to see that there are things you can do to improve upon you or your loved one's situation. And lastly, I want to leave you guys with some action steps. And these action steps are the same action steps that, in particular, these two kids that you see here on the screen, Presley and Owen, these are two kids that their parents came to this workshop, one of my ones that I did it live a number of years ago, and they were in the same situation you guys are in. They were struggling. Presley in particular was having trouble with sensory processing. She couldn't go to the grocery store with her family without having a meltdown. She couldn't go to ballet class or church class because there was just too many kids, too much sound, too much stimulation, and it would lead to a spiraling meltdown. And with Owen, same scenario, only he was having trouble with focus, and he was having trouble in school and sitting there, and he was disrupting class, and he was having trouble getting assignments done because he was unable to focus and pay attention. And the parents came to this workshop and they heard this same information that I'm going to share with you guys right now. And most importantly, they took action. Now, I'm going to share the story of these two kids here later on in the workshop, and you'll get to see where they ended up. But first off, as we get started, you'll see that there's a little emblem there called the perfect storm. And I title this workshop The Perfect Storm because if there's anybody of you out there that have watched the movie The Perfect Storm, you'll know that that was a massive weather storm. All right. And you'll know that there wasn't one thing that caused that huge, massive weather storm. It was a bunch of little things that all added up and kind of brewed and created the ingredients to create a massive weather storm, thus calling it the perfect storm. Well, tonight we're not going to be talking, or today, whatever time you're watching this, we're not going to be talking about a perfect storm as it relates to weather, but we're going to be talking about a perfect storm as it relates to neurology, a perfect neurological storm, if you will. So before we get into all of that, A little bit about myself. I love science. I love physiology. I'm kind of a nerd like that. I'm a big kid at heart. I love working with kids. We see a lot of kids and families in our practice, and I put on there listen first. And the reason why I put that is because obviously you can see the picture of um, my family here on the right, but you'll see the other picture of the house here. Now that's where I grew up. That's where my parents still live to this day. That's out in the middle of nowhere in Pennsylvania. And I put that on there because, as you can see, we had no neighbors. So my sister and I were by far the youngest people in this surrounding area. And all the people that did live semi close to us were all elderly people. And when I say old people, I'm talking like old timers. They grew up in the Depression. They fought in the World War II and the Korean War. I mean, they had just lived a completely different lifestyle and lived in a completely different world than we live today. So my sister and I growing up, we didn't have a whole lot of in common with them. Like they weren't interested in video games and sports and stuff like that, like my sister and I were. So they basically spent time telling stories. They loved coming over to our house and telling stories about the old days and their old times and their experience in life growing up. So I would listen. And I never realized how listening back then, would impact my job as I utilize it today. But I realized when I graduated school and I started practicing and seeing kids, especially kids and families and adults and teenagers that had sensory challenges, whether it's autism, ADHD, anxiety, sensory processing disorder, I learned that listening was a huge part of providing care. And I learned that when people would come into our office and they were going through this journey of trying to find solutions for themselves or for their loved ones, they go to all these different appointments and so often they're talked at, but they're not listened to. So believe it or not, when my wife and I opened up our chiropractic office, we had a lot of time. There wasn't a lot of people banging down the door, to come and visit and see us in our office because it's not like we're Chick-fil-A or anything where people are, they're directing traffic when we do our grand opening. So the point is we had a lot of time. So we would listen and we would sit there and we would listen to the story that these kids went through, in particular, their case history. And I learned that it didn't matter what their diagnosis was, whether it was autism or anxiety or ADHD or sensory processing disorder. The diagnoses were different for each and every kid. However, their histories, when I would listen to their story and listen to their histories kept sounding eerily similar. I would hear the same things over and over in their current health history, all the way back from pregnancy to birth to toddler infancy to toddler to teenage years. Their history was very similar, and that's what we're going to talk about here as we get into this information. But before I start, I want to show you guys a quick video, and this video is called The Moonwalking Bear. And I'm going to shut up and stop talking here. And I want you to watch this video and listen to the directions. But basically, you're going to see two groups of people, and they're going to be passing around a basketball. And your goal is to count the number of passes the team in white makes. So we're going to full screen this and watch this short video clip. There we go.
This is an awareness test. How many passes does the team in white make? The answer is 13. But did you see the moonwalking bear?
Now we're going to rewatch it here. And this time I want you to look for the moonwalking bear walking through the screen. So most people that watch that, they don't ever get the answer correct the first time. And the reason for that is because you're told to focus on something completely different. And the whole purpose of this workshop and this webinar is to point out the moonwalking bear as it relates to your child or your family member or your friend's struggles. Because as you go day to day and you're getting the notes home from the principal saying that your kid isn't behaving in class, or they're not focusing, or their grades aren't what they should be, or you're focusing on the meltdowns with handling transitions throughout the day at home, or the frustration that the kids won't wind down and go to sleep. It's so easy to focus on those things that you miss the moonwalking bear. You miss the thing that's been right in front of you this whole time. And the reason you missed it is not because you didn't see it. I mean, that moonwalking bear was going through there the first time you watched the video as well. But you missed it because you didn't know to look for it. And that's the whole premise of this information here tonight. So as we go and we click on to the next screen here, we're going to talk about what is this perfect storm that we're referencing here. When we talk about this perfect neurological storm, this is the stuff that I would hear and still hear to this day in a case history when I listen to the parent describe their kid's story. And they talk about where they've been, what got them to present day. And I realized that these things in the history left clues to what they're struggling with today. So when we talk about this perfect storm, it's really a sequence, and it starts all the way back to pregnancy. These things, first off, any emotional stress during the prenatal period. So anytime mom is pregnant and they're going through stress, whether it's physical stress, whether it's you're working full time as a parent and you're working right up until your due date, maybe you're having some emotional stress. Unfortunately, I see all the time in case histories where there was a prior miscarriage. So you're obviously stressed during the whole time you conceive the next time because you're stressed that this pregnancy won't go to full term. I've seen the stress of challenges getting pregnant, and there's all kinds of fertility therapies and different things like that families are going through. I've seen good stress be an effect on moms and babies during pregnancy. Maybe you are moving, maybe you got a new job, maybe you just bought a new house and you're rushing to get things ready before the baby comes. The point is that any physical, emotional, or chemical stress that the mom is going through during pregnancy, the baby is experiencing as well. And we're going to break down how that works here in a second. But any stress during pregnancy can kickstart this neurological storm. And that leads to the second thing. And if there is a moonwalking bear in all of this, this is the biggest moonwalking bear of them all. And that is the birth process. And we're going to dig into this topic even closer as we go here in this workshop. But any medical intervention at labor and delivery is a significant amount of physical stress on the baby. Now, moms out there, I know that you've went through the birth process and you know yourself, obviously, how much stress that is during the birth process. And even a natural vaginal delivery is statistically up to 40 to 60 pounds of pulling and tugging on the baby's head and neck. When you add in any medical intervention on top of that, C-section delivery, forceps extraction, vacuum extraction, cord wrapped around the neck during the delivery, or in utero constraint, the baby's upside down or breech. All of those things cause more stress and stress and tension during that labor and delivery. And the statistics show that, for instance, a C-section, we talked about a vaginal delivery being 40 to 60 pounds of tractioning on the baby's head and neck. A C-section literally doubles that. 60 to 90 pounds of axial traction and pulling on the baby's head and neck during a C-section delivery. So we got stressful pregnancy that leads oftentimes to a stressful birth and delivery, which then leads to a stressed out, colicky, constipated, fussy baby. Now, for any of you that have had a colicky, fussy baby that you just can't console and can't get him to calm down, you've probably taken him to the pediatrician and you hand him to the pediatrician. You're like, you're pulling your hair out because you're not sleeping. They're not sleeping. You don't know what to do. And you say, hey, what's wrong? And they say, well, they have colic. And then they usually say, well, don't worry. They'll eventually do what? Grow out of it, right? Well, it's my opinion that babies don't grow out of colic, right? They often grow into something else. And colic is nothing more than a sign that something isn't functioning properly. Babies have 3 different jobs to do: eat, sleep, and poop, right? So if a baby is not eating well, sleeping well, or pooping well, then that means something isn't functioning properly. That isn't just it's just they'll grow out of it. Something is not functioning properly within their body and their nervous system. And it's likely due to the stress during pregnancy and the birth process. And that leads from a stressed out, colicky, constipated baby to a growing into a sensory kid that's constantly sick. Maybe they're a little challenging as a toddler. They have trouble handling transitions. They're sick all the time. You start to notice that, maybe that tag is kind of itchy on their neck and they just don't like it. Maybe they don't like to put socks on because it feels weird. Maybe they have some aversions to certain textures. Those are things that kids start to grow into after they grow out of colic. And then oftentimes that leads to a sensory spectrum, hyperactive, emotionally stuck kid. Again, we go all the way back to pregnancy. All their body has known is stress during pregnancy, physical stress during the labor and delivery, stressed out, colicky, constipated, sick kid. You add in some emotional or chemical stressors like rounds and rounds of antibiotics and steroids that drive that neurology into a stressful mode even more. And eventually that leads to a exhausted, angry, anxious, depressed teenager. Now they're starting to develop some hormone challenges, some hormone changes, and they have been stuck in fight or flight since pregnancy, since birth, and now their nervous system's worn out. And now they're sleeping all the time and they wake up and they feel tired all the time. And then they get anxious and they get depressed and they start to know what some of these feelings, they can start to relate how they feel with some of the stuff that they're going through and their emotions. And then that leads to a stressed out, burnout, anxious adult that's got ADHD, right? That struggles with sleep, that struggles with night terrors, that struggles with, just feeling stressed and tense all the time. So really, when we go back all the way to the pregnancy, right? And whether you're watching this because you have a baby that's colicky, or you have a challenging toddler that's sick all the time, or you got a sensory kid that's sensitivities to sensory stimuli, or whether you're a stressed out, anxious adult, it's a sequence that builds and builds and builds. It's not something that just happens like that because of bad luck or because of genetics. It's a sequence of events that leads and builds as you grow and develop. Now, you might be thinking, well, what the heck does a chiropractor have to do with any of this stuff? Chiropractors, they like crack your back, right? Well, as a chiropractor, what a lot of people don't realize is I'm a chiropractor not because you have bones in your neck or your back. I'm a chiropractor because the function of the spine is to protect the nervous system. Now, the nervous system, as stated here by Dr. Bruce Lipton, is the function of the nervous system is to perceive the environment and to coordinate the behavior of all cells of the body. So think about that. Your nervous system's job is to perceive the environment and then coordinate in the behavior of every single cell of your body. Every function of your body is ran through the central nervous system. As chiropractors, that's why we're concerned with the spine. It's not because you have back pain and neck pain, okay? That's what most people relate chiropractic to. It's because your spine protects your central nervous system. And all of these things, anxiety, ADHD, sensory processing, those are neurological imbalances. Those are neurological disorders. So if you have a problem with the spine, that's going to interfere with how the nervous system that controls everything is functioning. And as a chiropractor, the only thing that we are looking to find and correct is what's called subluxation. And a subluxation, and I'm going to dive deep into what a subluxation is here in a second. But when you see the word subluxation, I want you to think of stress. Stress stuck on. Now, the nervous system has two different modes to it, and this is how it works. All right. This is a little diagram of what's called the gas versus brake pedal. And I think of the nervous system like driving your car. If the gas pedal of your car is like your sympathetic fight or flight stress response, which is one side of your nervous system, then the brake pedal of your car would be that of the parasympathetic, or what's called the rest and digest side of the nervous system. Now, the cool thing about this is when you're driving your car, you can't be on the gas pedal and the brake pedal at the same time. You got to have one or the other. And your nervous system and your brain are the same way. You're either in stress mode or you're in rest mode. You can't have your foot on the gas and the brake at the same time. So as we go through those things that I listed earlier, from pregnancy to the birth process to the, rounds and rounds of antibiotics and all that stuff and growing out of things, those are all stressors. And the more of those stressors that our body and our nervous system encounter, the more it starts to shift our nervous system to the gas pedal. Okay? To fight or flight, to stress mode. And the more our nervous system gets stuck on the gas pedal, okay, the more our nervous system spends in fight or flight, which is great. Fight or flight is great if you're fighting or flighting, but not if you're looking to rest, relax, digest, calm down, get good sleep, your immune system to be flourishing. All of those things are only possible when the brake pedal is engaging. So in other words, when you have subluxation, you are getting stuck in fight or flight. Now, subluxation is going to be broken down here. Okay, I break the term subluxation into what I call the 5 Ds. All right. The first is dyskinesia. And this is what everybody thinks of when they relate to chiropractic. Your neck is stuck, or you bend over to tie your shoes and something pops and you can't stand up. That's dyskinesia. That's when the bones of when the vertebrae of the spine become misaligned and stuck and fixated. That is dyskinesia. And this is where subluxation and stress in the nervous system starts. Misalignment and fixation. Signs that you have dyskinesia or that your baby had or has dyskinesia is things that are very common that kids often commonly struggle with, like torticollis and having a flat spot on one side of the head, trouble nursing, trouble latching. Those are all very common to signs that there is dyskinesia in the upper cervical spine. Torticollis is very self-explanatory. That's just when the vertebra gets stuck and the kid literally can't move their head. The flat spot occurs because a kid's range of motion is misaligned and stuck and they can't move their head like they should. And they develop a flat spot because their range of motion is not what it should be in the most commonly the neck. Trouble nursing, trouble latching, that is all related to the motion of the jaw, the neurology related to mastication and sucking, and also turning the head and getting in a comfortable position to even nurse properly. And we talked about how the birth process was a big part of that dyskinesia side of things. Not to mention how often kids are just in general, when they're learning how to walk and they're falling off chairs and they're playing sports and they're, bumping their head on things, like that type of physical stress is very, very common. But I told you we were going to talk about the birth process here in more detail, and that's what we're going to watch here. So this is a video of a C-section delivery with a vacuum extraction. Okay. And I'm going to play this video and I just want you to watch it because I can talk about how, the C-section delivery is 60 pounds of pulling and tractioning on the head and neck, but to see it live, to see a video of what that process actually is, can speak way more than what I can say with fancy statistics and all that. So we're going to watch this video.
Getting irritated. Oh, there you go. Come on, buddy. Ears of a girl. Ears of a girl. Make you cute for the camera. Oh, yes.
All right. So yeah, as you can see, that it doesn't take a chiropractor or a orthopedic surgeon or any doctor to see how pulling the baby out of the incision during a C-section can create misalignment and fixation in that upper cervical spine. And the reason why I paused the video right here is because in order, and thank goodness we have the medical technology to be able to, have a C-section when it's medically necessary, and to be able to get the baby into the world safely for both baby and mom. But the moonwalking bear is to not recognize how that could cause a problem. And that's what we're going to relate it to tonight. So imagine yourself, and you just gave birth, and you have this beautiful baby boy or girl, and you're holding them in your arms. And imagine if somebody came up to them and asked if they can hold the baby, and they grabbed them by the head and picked them up like that doctor just picked up that baby during the birth process. As a parent, you would be furious. And the reason you'd be furious is because babies have a big head and a little neck, and you would never pick the baby up by their head like that. But that's what goes on during a delivery, especially a C-section delivery like that. So this is an up close still shot of the torquing and twisting that goes on during that process. So you can easily see how misalignment, fixation, dyskinesia can be started right from that birth process. Now here's a study. Here's a study done by a medical doctor, and he was examining what he calls somatic dysfunction, which is a fancy word for dyskinesia. So somatic dysfunction is just misalignment and fixation in the neural spinal system there. And he wasn't even a chiropractor. He was a medical doctor, and he examined, and he found that 99% of the kids that he examined after birth had at least one pattern of subluxation or fixation misalignment in the spine. And he found that the more strenuous, the more laborious, the more stressful and more traumatic the birth was, the more areas of stress and tension and subluxation he found in their neural spinal system. And like I said, this is a study done by not even a chiropractor. And it's just proving the fact of how much stress and tension is created in the nervous system by the birth process alone. And the first D, dyskinesia, when you think of, fixation and misalignment, the next D, okay, this is dyskinesia, leads to the second D, which is disafferentation. And this is how a misalignment ties into how it could affect something like sensory issues, or sensory stimulation, or focus, or the nervous system, or any neurological disorder as well. So dyskinesia, misalignment, fixation leads to disafferentation. Disafferentation is abnormal sensory input. That's a big word for abnormal sensory input. Now, much like the nervous system has two different modes to it, the gas pedal and the brake pedal, fight or flight, stress mode, and rest and digest mode, you get two types of sensory input into the brain. And the first is called nociception. The second is called proprioception. Now, proprioception is good. Proprioception is good calming input to the brain. I think of it like Beethoven to the brain. All right. If you're getting ready to relax and go to sleep and calm down before bed or whatever, you might be more inclined to listen to Beethoven. It's going to be relaxing, right? The opposite of that is called nociception. That is noise. That's like Metallica to the brain. All right. Now, most people, if you're getting ready to go to bed and sleep, you wouldn't turn on Metallica, because Metallica is going to get your nervous system all amped up. If you're getting ready to lift weights or exercise or do something like that, you might put on Metallica. You probably wouldn't put on Beethoven. So the point is that when you have dyskinesia, instead of having calming input to the brain, it turns the radio station to Metallica. So your brain is constantly getting Metallica, noise, noise, noise input coming in. Okay. Now, here's a little video that describes what sensory processing disorder is from a more elementary level explanation, but it is a great example and illustrator of how this works neurologically. So we're going to watch this video here. Oh, maybe. Sorry. Here we go.
Some kids are really bouncy and can't sit still. Some kids aren't very coordinated. Some see food as a pile of toxic goo that hurts their mouth and jangles their taste buds. School might be a mysterious place where things don't make much sense. If this sounds like you, you may have sensory processing disorder, and we're going to explain it here. Your body has 7 senses: vision in your eyes, hearing in your ears, touch in your skin, taste in your mouth, and smell in your nose. And you have 2 movement senses: your muscles and your sense of balance. In sensory processing disorder, these senses don't communicate right with your brain. Think of the nerves connecting your brain and senses as a set of roads. Those roads should be smooth superhighways so that the senses and brain can communicate fast. If you have sensory processing disorder, then some of your roads are bumpy and rough. You can also think of the senses as having a broken volume control. If the volume is too high, you feel your senses too strongly. If the volume is too low, you won't feel sensation at all. In fact, you'll want more. Some kids overcome these problems as they grow older. Others need help. Help is usually occupational therapy, and it's fun.
Okay, so yeah, even though as elementary of a stick figure drawing type analogy that was, it still is a great example. And I like to reference back to that highway that it showed. It showed the straight lines from brain to body. And then it showed, if you have sensory processing disorder, that highway is a little zigzagged, right? It's not a straight, clear communication channel. And that makes a lot of sense and really resonates well when you're talking about seeing that, okay? That is where that zigzag, that miscommunication from brain to body starts, and the sensory system starts to become inefficient. And instead of hearing Metallica or Beethoven, you're hearing Metallica. Now, when we talk about that word proprioception, that's the perception of movement. And the way that the spine and the nervous system is impacted by that is 60% of all the sensory input to the brain comes from motion of the spine. And 33% of all of that comes from just this upper neck area, the upper cervical area. So literally, the majority of all the sensory input that we're experiencing throughout a day, whether it's light or sound or taste or touch, is coming from motion and movement of the spine. Now, when we talk about subluxation and that word that we are referencing here, this is super important. Okay, so I put on here subluxation. If you remember, the word subluxation means stress. It means stress stuck on. So whether you get, whether that subluxation is a cause from stress during pregnancy or the birth process or all of those different stressors build up stress and tension in the neural spinal system, that is a sensory processing problem. But perception is key. The perception of our environment is key. And now I put on here, is there a snake in the room? And this is a huge point that I want to drive home. So I put a snake because I hate snakes. All right. If I'm sitting here in this room and a snake were to slither around into this room, I would be freaking out. Okay. That would put my nervous system to the gas pedal like no other, because I hate snakes. And my perception of snakes is fear. My perception of snakes is stress. So a snake comes into the room here, my nervous system is going to shift into the gas pedal mode no matter what. Okay. Now, if you like snakes and you're sitting there going, oh, I love snakes, I have one crawling around my house right now, then make it something else. Make it something that you perceive as a threat, whether it's spiders or whatever. So let's say you're sitting in the room and a snake were to slither into the room you're sitting in. All right. That's going to elicit a stress response. Okay. It would be very challenging for me to be able to focus on much else except for that snake. All right. If I'm sitting in a classroom setting and a snake slithers in the room and the teacher is there going, hey, you know what? Don't worry, Nick. It's just a snake. It won't hurt you. Just focus on what I'm saying here. It's not going to bother you. I still would not be able to focus very well on what the person presenting information to me or in class or whatever. I wouldn't be able to focus knowing that there's a snake in there, regardless of what the person told me or if it was a nice snake or whatever, poisonous or not. I'm freaking out. I would not be able to focus. I would not be able to pay attention. Okay. Now let's translate this into a real life scenario with, let's say, one of your kids, and they're having trouble focusing in class, or they're having trouble focusing in school, and they're just grinding their pencil into the desk because they can't do their math homework. They can't focus. They can't think right. They're disrupting class. They're all over the place. And the teacher's sitting there saying, hey, Johnny, listen, you need to focus. You need to focus. And then if ultimately you end up with a diagnosis, well, they can't focus because they have ADHD. They can't focus because they have ADD. They have anxiety, whatever. Okay. The nervous system doesn't know the difference between a snake in the room or subluxation or the birth process or stress at home or emotional stress. The nervous system is either on or off. You're either in fight or flight or you're not. And if you're a kid that all you've known is stress from pregnancy to the birth process to infancy to toddler age, your nervous system is hardwired to perceive the environment like there's a snake in the room, even though there's not a snake in the room. Your nervous system doesn't know the difference. So now we sit there and we look at little Johnny or little Susie and say, well, they have the ADHD, they have sensory processing disorder or whatever. There's nothing wrong with little Johnny and little Susie. The reason they can't focus is because their nervous system thinks there's a snake in the room, even though there's not. Their nervous system has been stuck on fight or flight since birth and pregnancy, and that's all their nervous system knows. So of course they can't focus. Of course they can't sit and pay attention and sit in class and listen to the teacher and not disrupt class and not have a meltdown or whatever, because their nervous system thinks they're fighting or flighting, even though they're trying to sit and rest and relax and go to sleep. And that's just a huge point to drive home, because there's nothing wrong with the kids. There's nothing wrong with their brain. They don't have a genetic issue. They don't have, it's their nervous system is just stuck in fight or flight. Now, the first D, dyskinesia, leads us to disafferentation. That leads us to our third D, which is dysautonomia. Now, dysautonomia is a fancy word for abnormal autonomic output. So our nervous system is receiving Metallica to the brain. So if you have, it's the old saying, garbage in, garbage out. If you have Metallica coming in, guess what you're going to have coming out? And one of those things coming out is dysautonomia, abnormal autonomic output. And Dr. Bruce Lipton, who we referenced earlier, he talks about you can't be in growth and protection at the same time. Okay, so your autonomic nervous system is the part of the nervous system that controls digestion. It controls the immune system. It controls heart rate and respiration and all these different functions of the body that we don't have to think about. We don't eat food and say, okay, stomach, do your thing. It just automatically does it. That's the autonomic nervous system. So if your nervous system is receiving stressful input to the brain, then you're going to see stressful output, which is going to decrease digestion, decrease things like bladder control, bedwetting, respiratory issues, immune challenges. All of those things, digestion, immunity, respiration, all those things are put on the back burner when your nervous system is in protection mode. So again, dyskinesia, disafferentation, dysautonomia, right? It's one big crescendo. And one of the big ones that is becoming more and more popular in research and in science is the vagus nerve. And we talk a lot about the vagus nerve in our office and in our social media pages, but the vagus nerve is part of the nervous system that controls the brake pedal side of the nervous system. So it is calming, it is relaxing. It pumps the brakes in the nervous system. And the vagus nerve, the term vagus means wandering. It actually wanders out of the cranium, out of the skull, and it wanders its way down the cervical spine, and it influences the heart and the digestive system and the immune system and inflammation, the gut. We've heard a lot of things about the gut-brain connection. The vagus nerve is key in proper function of those systems. And there's a lot of research. Like I said, this is a study done, we talked about the whole brain-gut connection. This was a study they did where they were measuring on subjects the electrical stimulation to the vagus nerve. And what they found was that vagal nerve stimulation, and they were stimulating it with like a little sensor that provides like an electrical shock wave into the upper cervical part of the spine, or in other words, stimulating the vagus nerve. And they found that when they stimulated the vagus nerve, it potently reduced intestinal inflammation. Just by stimulating all the way up here, it reduced inflammation in the gut. And so many kids and adults with sensory issues, anxiety, autism, ADHD, they also have gut issues. They also have an IBS and inflammatory, bloating and gas issues and constipation and diarrhea. And they also found in this study that when they removed the vagus nerve, or a vagotomy, it had the reverse effect. Removing the vagus nerve increased inflammation in the gut. So if you have dyskinesia and you went through the birth process and that leads to disafferentation and dysautonomia, it is literally creating inflammation in the gut more than there should be. And that's what the research is pointing to. So chiropractic is a vagus nerve stimulator. When we make an adjustment to the spine, to the nervous system, it stimulates the vagus nerve, which is awesome. And that's why we see the results that we do, not only with sensory challenges and focus and all this stuff, but with digestive issues and better gut inflammation and less bloating and all these different things in relation to not just sensory issues, but immune system and digestion and all of those facets because of dysautonomia. We're improving the function of the autonomic nervous system. This study here is a study where they measured something called sensory modulation. So in other words, they were measuring different sensory sensitivity triggers on kids. And they found that kids that had a lower level of vagus nerve activity had higher levels of sensory sensitivities. And quite opposite too, kids that had higher vagus nerve activity had lower sensory challenges and sensitivities. So those are just two cool studies that I thought were awesome because they are relating exactly to what we're talking about here. And this is the fourth D, dysponesis, that we got dyskinesia, disafferentation, dysautonomia, and dysponesis. Dysponesis is energy output. So again, we talked about if you have metallica coming in, you're going to have metallica coming out. Now you can have metallica coming out with the autonomic nervous system, and dysponesis is abnormal energy output. So this is where we see lots of high energy, hyperactivity. We'll talk more about what that looks like here in a second, but abnormal energy output and organization. So proprioceptive input. We talk about balance, coordination issues, which a lot of kids that have sensory challenges sometimes struggle with tone and posture and coordination and balance. That is dysponesis. Now, the fifth D is something that's not really a scientific D, but it's a real D. It is disconnected. And in other words, when your nervous system has known nothing but fight or flight, stress mode, from pregnancy to birth to the infancy years, toddler years, teenage years, your nervous system gets so disconnected with the perception of the environment you're in, your brain just thinks you're in fight or flight all the time, no matter where you're at or what your environment is. There is no off switch. You're stuck in the gas pedal. You're stuck in fight or flight, and your brain and your nervous system just become so hot wired to be in fight or flight that it never gets a chance to calm down, rest, relax, digest, restore, and repair. That's the fifth D. So when kids come into our office or adults, we have what we call three different categories. And these aren't diagnoses by any means, but these are just three different types of scenarios that we would see. And the first is a raging bull. Now, this would be a kid that is just on the go 24/7. I mean, a raging bull is just, on the gas pedal all day, every day. They hate taking naps. They don't take naps. They have trouble falling asleep at night. They finally do crash and burn, and they fall asleep for 4 or 5 hours, and they're up at 5 a.m. and they're just on the go all day, every day, 100 miles an hour. That's a raging bull. These kids oftentimes have sensory sensitivities. They probably don't eat a whole lot. They kind of, have some textile texture sensitivities. That would be a raging bull. A drunken bull would be a kiddo that has a little bit of a slower development. A lot of kids that are drunken bulls, they have poor posture and low tone and a little clumsy, maybe a little balance and coordination issues. Maybe they didn't go through a crawling phase when they were a child. They scooted, or they did an army crawl, or they had trouble sitting up. In those, 6 to 9 month years before crawling, they were kind of just would fall over and tip to one side. And that maybe even carry on to their toddler years, where they can't even sit at the dinner table and they just kind of flop forward and flop around. That would be a drunken bull. Now, a raging drunken bull, is a combination of both. Okay, I would describe this as a kid with a Ferrari engine with bicycle brake pedals, meaning their brain, their nervous system is just revving at 1,000 RPMs all the time, but they don't have the core stability and the balance and the coordination to support all that energy. All right, so those are three typical presentations that we would see. And if you're watching this whole presentation, which I hope you have, you might be thinking, well, now what? In my experience, as parents or people watch this presentation, you've related, because I know each and every one of you parents out there, as I was going through those different scenarios of stressors, pregnancy and the birth process and all that, you're sitting there thinking, well, that was my kid. Or I'm sitting there describing the raging bull, and you're like, that explains my son or my daughter to a T. They're just go, go, go all the time. Well, now what? And the cool thing is that we have technology within our office and a lot of other offices around the country and even the world that can measure how the nervous system is functioning. All right. Now, this in particular, these scans that you see here are three different examples of the raging bull, the drunken bull, and the raging drunken bull. So in the center, you see the raging bull. You see this one is measuring energy. This is the one that's measuring dysponesis, or energy output. So as you can see, all those red bars on there, that is noise. That is energy output. Okay, we talked about Metallica to the brain. This is Metallica coming out. All right, and you can see the one below that where there's those black squiggly lines, and then you see kind of the white hourglass shape that's nice and smooth. The black lines are the energy patterns, the energy organization within this kid's nervous system. And as you can see, there's a lot of noise going on there. Okay, that would be a raging bull. The one on the left would be a drunken bull. As you can see, there's not a whole lot of color, not a whole lot of red. We see a lot of red in the neck on the drunken bull one, but everything below that is white, and you see some yellow in there. Yellow is that fatigue or core stability. Yellow is less energy than needed to hold the body upright. Okay. And when we run these scans, kids are sitting in a chair upright under the stress of gravity. So we're measuring how much tension, how much energy is in the nervous system for them just to sit in a stool in our office while we do these scans. And in this case, like I said, you can see that whole right side where that yellow is shut down. It's fatigued. It's exhausted. This kiddo doesn't have the stability, the core energy to properly hold the body upright against the stress of gravity. And then the raging drunken bull is a combination of both. We see lots of energy firing, and then we see the whole left side just on fire, and then the right side is flat. The right side is yellow. We see that whole organization of energy output dying on that right side. And that's that core stability. That's the Ferrari engine going, but don't have the core stability or the brake pedals to support that energy system within the nervous system. Now, this is the other scan that we do in our office that measures dysautonomia. All right, so dyskinesia, remember, it leads to disapparentation, which leads to dysautonomia and dysphonesis. This scan was dysphonesis. This scan here measures dysautonomia. Now, this one is a thermal scan that's measuring temperature. So when we run these scans, again, they're sitting in a stool in our office. We run this right up the spine from bottom to top. And what you want to see on these scans is white. White means that there is no difference in temperature, or very minimal difference in temperature on the right side versus the left side where the nerves come out of the spine. If you see temperature differences by more than about a degree or 1.5 degrees or 2 degrees or more, that's where a color would show up. So on this kid, you can see this upper cervical area and that upper neck area, all that red bar going to the left, red bar going to the right. This kid in particular had a very stressful birth, C-section delivery, traumatic, all of that stuff, colicky, fussy, the whole perfect storm scenario we talked about earlier. And you can see the levels of dysautonomia in that upper cervical spine due to the stress and tension of the pregnancy and birth. And then you see on a follow-up scan, we can see the nervous system changing. So that's the cool thing about this technology is not only are we starting and seeing, okay, here's where there's nerve interference, but we're measuring how the nervous system is changing over time. And that's a cool thing about this technology. The last thing that we're measuring here is something called heart rate variability. Now, heart rate variability is more of a global measurement of how the nervous system's handling the stresses of life. So the HRV, this one's measuring the neural muscular systems of the nervous system. This one's measuring the dysautonomia, the autonomic nervous system, and more segmental, like where is that area of subluxation specifically. And this one is looking at it globally. And in fact, most like smartwatches, and if you're into like sports and you're an active person, you may have heard of like the Whoop bands and the new Apple watches and all that stuff. They are measuring, one of the things that they measure, you know, when they measure your sleep and all that stuff is heart rate variability. And heart rate variability is a great test of how your overall health and nervous system is functioning. So this graph you see here, this white dot in the bottom left-hand segment of this graph is where this individual's heart rate variability measures out. Now, that white dot, the closer to the green zone, the better. So you can see this individual is shifted to the down left quadrant of that box there. That means the further left that white box is from that center line of the crosshair, the further left, the more the nervous system is shifted into fight or flight, stress mode. That would be very common to see in kids with hyperactivity or focus issues, meaning their nervous system is just stuck in fight or flight. Now, the up and down part, the vertical aspect of that heart rate variability graph here is like your battery life on your cell phone. I think of it like your battery life, you know, on your cell phone or your laptop is the more apps you got running on your cell phone, the more battery life it's going to use up, right? So same thing with the nervous system. The higher up that white box is towards the green zone is like having a full battery charge. You know, you start your day, you're getting ready to go to work, you got a full charge and battery. You can use all the apps, take videos, watch stuff, all the stuff you need to do, and you got a full charge of battery. That battery is going to be able to handle the stress of utilizing the phone in those ways. The lower that is would be like starting your day with a 50% battery charge or 25% battery charge. You're going to have to be more conservative. That battery life is not going to handle the stress of using it like it would and for as long before it runs out of gas, before it reaches its breaking point and it shuts down. And that's what this HRV graph is showing us. The higher up, the more centered, the closer to that green zone, the more adaptable the nervous system is going to be to handle the stresses of life, whether it's the birth process, whether it's, as we said, toddlers learning how to walk and falling down and collisions. If as you know, playing sports, as you get older and you're sitting at a desk and posture and all those different stressors of life we go through, emotional stress, chemical stress, all the different stresses we talked about, the better your HRV is, the better your nervous system is going to be able to handle it. Now, I told you I was going to share with you the story of Presley and Owen when I first started this webinar. Now, this is Presley. As I said, she came to our office. Her parents, listened to this same information. She was 3 years old. They were getting concerned, and I wrote the thing on here. You can read it yourself, the little testimonial that she wrote. But she was having a lot of trouble with sensory issues. She couldn't go to the store. They wanted, she was trying to do ballet class, but it was just too overstimulating. The sounds and the people, the kids, they couldn't go to this grocery store. They couldn't go to the county fair, all these different things that they wanted to do. They were unable to because it would lead to a meltdown for Presley. So she came in, we did the scans. We found that her nervous system was stressed and overstimulated. We did the case history. We went through the birth process and the pregnancy, and we found that whole recipe, those stressors that we just talked about, very similar. And that was the cause of her problems. So as we went through care, and I believe this was Presley's scan, actually, she had a lot of stress and tension in that upper cervical area. So as we went through care and we saw that stress and tension change, and we were stimulating the vagus nerve, and we were improving dyskinesia and improving disafferentation and dysautonomia and dyskinesis. That's the cool thing about this stuff, is that when you change the nervous system, the body has to change too. Okay, you can't improve dyskinesia without improving disafferentation. And you can't improve disafferentation without improving dysautonomia and dyskinesis. So when these scans are improving, the nervous system is improving. The nervous system is calming. And Presley ended up having a great transition to where, I remember she came in and their big challenge, their big test, because she was doing better. They started kind of experimenting, going to the grocery store, and she was doing better and handling transitions better, less meltdowns, all those things. And the big test was going to the Cranberry Festival up north. Her family lives up north, and there's a huge festival up there. And they go every year, but they haven't since she was born because of the extra stimulation that it gave to her. So they decided to go, and she came back to our office and was so excited to show me a picture where not only did they go to the Cranberry Festival, and she walked throughout the whole thing, thousands of people, loud sounds, music blaring. She went to the Cranberry Festival. She had a great time, and she sat in a chair, and she brought a picture back and showed us that she got her face painted like a tiger. And that was huge because she would never, ever allow anybody to touch her face, let alone sit in a chair for 20 minutes or half hour, whatever, and get her whole face painted like a tiger, to feel the brush stroking on her face and her skin, and to sit still for that long with all the other sensory stimulus going on through the festival. She was able to do that. And then she was able to go to ballet class, and she was able to do all these things, not because of me or because of what I did or I'm special, but because chiropractic works, because chiropractic care stimulates the vagus nerve. It calms the nervous system. You improve dyskinesia. You improve the way that these scans work. You're changing that radio station from Metallica to Beethoven, and the body has to change too. And that's where her results came from. Same thing with Owen. Owen was a little older than Presley when he started coming in, but he was having trouble in school. In fact, he was from a small school, and 15 kids in his class or so, and his teacher had him sit in the corner of the classroom, off away from all the other kids, because he couldn't stop interrupting class. He couldn't stop messing around with other kids and disrupting class, and he wasn't focusing, and he wasn't able to get his homework done. He would sit at night and just carve his pencil into the desk at home, because he knew how to do the math work, the math homework, or whatever he was doing. But he literally said, I can't sit down and focus on how to do it. He knows how to do it, but he can't do it. And it's just a weird thing. That was where Owen was at. Now, this scan here is Owen's initial scans. And this one, I'm showing you the viewpoint of the dyskinesis, or energy output scans. Now, as you can see, I put in a normal scan there down on the bottom. So that bottom scan is how much energy the nervous system should be under, the muscular system should be under, for somebody just to sit there. So Owens, you can see all the red bar, the red noise up there. He was a classic raging bull. You can see his total energy score was 277. literally meaning that his brain and nervous system was functioning 3 times harder, was firing 3 times harder than it should have been for him just to sit still. So of course, the whole snake in the room example I gave you earlier, of course he couldn't focus in class because his brain thought there was a snake in the room. His nervous system was stuck in fight or flight. He had 3 times the higher energy levels than he should have just to be sitting there. So as Owen progressed through scans, you can see how his total energy came from 277 down to 130. Now, I think you probably know by now, but he got to finish the school year. He had a parent-teacher conference, and he was doing better. And the teacher was like, "Wow, I don't know what you're doing, but keep doing it." And he was able to finish the school year sitting by his friends instead of sitting isolated in the corner in the room, and was just super excited about that. He was able to focus better in class. He was able to sit there and learn and listen better. He was able to get homework done in the evenings more effectively. And again, you can see how the energy went from that Metallica to more Beethoven. So I just wanted to share those couple stories with you. And I have a couple other stories I could share with you, but we're going to skip to the end here. So I just want you to know that you're not alone, number one, and that there is hope. I said at the beginning that I wanted to leave you guys with hope. Okay. And some of the common things that we see when we go through a case history and we do scans on an adult or a kid or a child, and we find that there's extra stress and tension on the nervous system. We find dyskinesia and disaphorentation and dyskinesis and all those 5 Ds and subluxation and stress, and you improve that stuff, you're going to see better balance and coordination. You're going to see a better connection. You're going to see better focus. You're going to see a calmer brain, a calmer nervous system, more control, handling transitions better. You're going to see better sleep patterns, better digestive issues, better immune challenges, because when you improve the function of the nervous system, the body has to follow suit. So lastly, I told you I was going to give you some action steps. And number one is always ask questions, right? If you're watching this video, I know that you're probably a person that's constantly looking for ways to help your child, and don't ever stop. Okay. And if you ask a question, if something doesn't make sense to you when you're seeking out help, whether it be in a neurologically focused chiropractic office or a holistic practitioner or a pediatrician or a psychologist or a neurologist or wherever you're at, always ask questions and make sure that it makes sense with you. And if it doesn't, find somebody else that can answer those questions or that explains it in a better way. Never stop looking for answers. Secondly, would be to reduce the stressors in our lives and in our kids' lives. Now, I could do a whole other presentation on the different types of stress. We talked about the big ones, the birth process and stress during pregnancy, but there's so many other stressors that we are just innovated with in our life today with white lights from screens and tablets to red dyes and yellow dyes in foods and pesticides and preservatives and 5G and all these different things that are a stress on our body. They all shift and kick the nervous system into fight or flight, stress dominant mode, and they all create stress and subluxation in the nervous system. So one of the other best things you can do is to remove as many of those things as you can. Remove, dietary changes, limit screen times, different things like that. But lastly, get you, your family, your kids scanned. So many times I've done this workshop and I know how much chiropractic care can impact things, but ultimately it's up to you to make that decision, to take action, to get into and get scans for you and your child. Because when people ask, hey, can you help with this? Can you help with that? My kid's struggling with this. My kid's struggling with that. It doesn't matter what the diagnosis is. To me, it matters how is the nervous system functioning. If we find stress and tension in the nervous system, then you better believe a neurologically focused chiropractic office can help. So whether you're in the town of Janesville here or the Rock County area, or maybe you're in the United States and a different country, somewhere across the world, reach into the comments there, send us a message. We will find somebody close to you that is trained in this information, and we will get you connected with them. They're going to do the scans. They'll do all that stuff. But ultimately, if you're watching this video and you come in, here's what the process looks like for a new patient evaluation. Number one, you come into the office, we do a case history. Like I said, that's where we're digging deep into, we're listening. We're listening to the history that you or your loved one has went through, from pregnancy to birth to teenage years to adulthood. The more of those stressors that we find, the more check marks we can mark as to, okay, that makes sense, why you're having these issues. And then we move on to the scans, and we run those scans on every single patient, whether you're a baby or an adult. We get those scans because those are going to let us know how the nervous system is functioning. And then once we see how the nervous system is functioning, then we can give you a care plan that is designed not to treat your diagnosis. We're not here to treat anxiety or treat autism or treat ADHD. That's what medication is for. We are here to improve the function of the nervous system. And like I said earlier, when you improve the function of the nervous system, when you calm the brain, the body follows suit. So watching this, I know all this information is coming at you, and it's very easy to sit here in a state of wonder. You're wondering, man, could something this simple, this subluxation thing, my kid went through the birth process. Could something that simple be what's causing the issues they're struggling with today, 8 years later? The meltdowns, the massive, neurological storms that we're referencing here. Could something this simple be the cause of that? Like I said, the only way we know is if we get scans and we find out. And that's the opportunity I'd like to give you. If you are in this area, please reach out to us. We will get these scans. We will find out if, in fact, this is causing the struggles that your kids are dealing with or you are dealing with, and we can help you in that regard. So that's all the information I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. As I said, please subscribe to this channel, like this video, and most importantly, please share this information with somebody that you know could benefit. My name is Dr. Nick Centra, and thanks for watching.